Fear is one of the single biggest experiences of my life, beginning in a habit in early childhood and continuing in many ways to the present day. So this is quite a rich topic for me to explore. And I'd like to begin by talking a little bit about the source of fear, which as far as I understand, it is I'm just going to remove this weight here, is the biology of trauma. That when fear stimuli is repeatedly created in the body of an infant and not repaired, that it can leave the body in a state of hyperarousal that becomes chronic and, in fact, addictive. And so the way trauma is supposed to work is you have a life-threatening reality event, and the body puts out fight, flight, freeze chemicals. And if you run or freeze and then shake or fight, the chemicals get discharged in the body, and if the ego is successful, if the ego and the environment is successful in responding to the trauma, then the fear is dissipated and the source of fear is eliminated, and you go back to a natural, healthy, set state. However, if fear is repeatedly created, one, the ability to freeze and shake, run, or fight is blocked because you start to fight and then you're punished, or you run and you're punished. You feel trauma and your body maybe wants to run or fight or something, and then the adults, not understanding traumatic biology in a traumatically illiterate culture. In other words, we create great deals of trauma in our culture, but then we make it worse by not repairing it and punishing, meaning adding new trauma to the source of the existing trauma, that then something like PTSD starts to set in, where the chemical is created, the response begins to happen in the biology, then a new trauma occurs, and a new response comes in the body, and a new trauma occurs, and it basically puts the body in a lockdown mode where it's afraid, the body becomes more afraid of itself and its own healthy reactions than it does of the consequences of being in PTSD and chronic fear. And this goes on completely invisibly because the grown-ups around do not understand traumatic biology in a traumatically illiterate culture. And so this happened any number of times in many of my early memories. And as a result, I have lived with a backdrop of biological fear, meaning in many ways, the only way that I know that I exist in a given moment is I check how tense are the fear muscles. Where are they holding? It's like, oh, I'm still here because I can check in with that tension. And when, we often form our identities by the loudest energy, in our awareness. And fear is pretty loud. Trauma and fear are very loud energies. And so when they become chronic, the identity actually forms around what is the dominant chronic state, which in this case is trauma and fear. And so, that being the case, who am I? I'm the one who's scared. How do I know that this is me? Well, I can feel the place where I've been holding on my body. I feel I was this way before. I'm still this way. I'm still here. This is me. I'm the one who tightens my muscles like this. I'm the one who busily scans the future for all kinds of horrible events, and then reacts and tries to solve all those possible problems. I'm the one who avoids whole sections of reality because they're too scary, and I'm the one who's scared, even when I'm alone in my own big house and all that, because who knows what could happen in the future. And so this primary identity, has been a good 60% of my reality, because there's also the need, in order to sustain and produce the identity of fear, there's the need to reference the past pains that created the fear. And so, we don't like a lack of integrity. So if I'm the one who's scared, then I'm also the one who's scared of specific things. I'm not going to pretend I'm just scared of nothing and crazy. So my mind has to go out and re-put together the various things that led to the fear. So I'm the one who's afraid because, when I was 2 years old, the dog kept knocking me over, and this, because when I was 2 years old, my mother screamed and raged at me like this, and left me in a panic, and because this and because that, and it's like, that's why I'm scared. So there's a number of kind of spiraling dynamics around trauma and fear. One of them is that when you're in trauma and you're terrified, you seek something familiar and known. However, when you are traumatized and terrified repeatedly, what is most familiar and known is the tension of being traumatized. And so the trauma leads you to seek something familiar, and the most familiar thing to find is the trauma. Well, that's an endless loop. The trauma helps you, you're in disorientation. Trauma and shock takes you into a state of disorientation. Well, you want to ground and refine your identity. So what you gravitate to is your strongest memories, your strongest feelings, and your strongest body sensation. Well, that are all of your past pains and traumas. Well, one of the things that fear is a projection of past pains into the future. So that then fuels new fear. And so there are a number of these, fear factories that just go on endlessly. And this is added to, particularly in cultures of traumatic illiteracy, because then when you're in trauma and you're expressing some of that, your surroundings are going to say things like, don't do that, don't say that, that's ungrateful, don't say that about your parents. And the message is, again, we're going to hurt you, we're not going to like you if you continue this. Now, the trauma is perpetuated again with age regression, because when you are traumatized at a young age without repair, certain strong energies stay frozen in specific emotional ages, like 2 years old. Now, when that 2-year-old energy gets triggered, you don't feel 30, 40 years old, you feel 2 years old. And the dynamic of the 2-year-old in relationship to a traumatizing and, in some cases, sociopathic environment is that the child feels terrified, because the child is something very small. It's the equivalent if you were to regularly reactivate a dynamic in which you felt, okay, so you're 5, 6 feet tall, whatever, but now you're dealing with 30-foot giants, because that's what parents, that's what older brothers and stuff are to a young child, to an infant. So just the dynamic of scale. Well, if you were to suddenly be in a conflict right now with a 30-foot giant, you would feel traumatized, because you would know that the 30-foot giant could kill you without any chance of you coming back. And so this goes on psychologically. It's very interesting in sexual predation and sexual abuse. The abusers talk about when the predator starts doing this and this and this and this, that they feel 5 years old. Well, as soon as they're regressed into a 5-year-old, then the predator is a giant, because the 5-year-old is very small. And so now there's a power imbalance that is enormous, and will lead to a certain amount of facilitation, enabling of the abuse, because the abuse, it's not really, there's not two grown-ups. There's, someone in predator mode who feels like a giant, and then there's a 5-year-old, a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old that's just trying to please the abuser, just like the child trying to please the parent, trying to please the older sibling, the relative, the culture, the government, and so this then leads to enormous terror. As soon as you're regressed and are relating as a small thing in compared to something very large, you're now in an impossible scale relationship, giant and infant. So it leads to a collapse rather than a confrontation and a transcendence of the trauma. And so these loops just go round and round and round and round and round and round and round. And so the first time that I worked with fear directly and consciously was with there's a channeled entity named Lazarus that produced a cassette called Conquering Fear. And I listened to that around age 13 and did some of the various techniques involved, one of which is to visualize your fear and then intercept it with, funny things. So just break up, play it frontwards and backwards, make it boring, make it lose its charge, add in funny music or cartoons in the background. And so that's basically, one way of working with it. And so I did some visualization. And there's also, this from Lazarus, saying that every fear is a symptom of a belief that is faulty. So if you believe something that's faulty, then it will create pain. It will create something you don't want. 1. 2, fear, this is me, what fear is past pain projected into the future. You don't get fear unless you've A, experienced pain, B, believe that the pain will happen again, and then 3, are afraid of the pain you expect to happen again. And so, a 12-year-old boy goes up to his high school sweetheart, his crush, and mumbles something about her beauty, and she laughs in his face. And he feels miserable and small and hurt. And he has to come up with the narrative of why he's feeling miserable, small, and hurt. And given the self-centeredness and self-reference of children and adolescents, the narrative is going to be all about him. It's not going to be about the fact that she hasn't learned compassion from her parents, that she's in a sociopathic culture, that this has nothing to do with him in many ways. The message is all going to be, I'm unlovable, I'm a jerk, of course she doesn't like me, who would want me, no one wants me, no one loves me. And so he's going to make sense of the pain, meaning he wanted her to smile and say, you're my hero, and instead she laughs at him as if he has no value. And so he's saying, see, I have no value, and will take on a lot of her disease, her faulty beliefs. So she has faulty beliefs, about him and about herself that she is externalizing on him. He's going to take it all on. Well, having decided that he's unworthy and unlovable and, nobody would ever love him and, and he's ugly, all of that, he then expects, reasonably, that the next person is going to humiliate him for expressing attraction as well, and he expects that this is not going to end anytime soon, because why would it end if you're unlovable? If you're unlovable, well then nobody can love you. So this is going to go on indefinitely. But there's also then other consequences, like if you're unlovable, then you're never going to be loved. If you're never going to be loved, you're always going to be alone. If you're going to be shamed and alone forever, that's a horrible thing. That's very, very painful because, of course, what we want is the complete opposite. We want to be totally loved, adored, appreciated, noticed, valued. That's what we want. And what pain is a separation. We want this, but what we have is this. We want this, we have this. The gap between those two, what we want and what we have, is pain. I really want this, and I don't have it. It's so far away. It's so painful. Separation from desire for equals pain. If you don't care about it and it's separate, it's like I love where I am and I'm separate from Mexico. Who cares? No pain there. But if I long, I wish, I really, really, really want to be in Mexico, but I'm, in Canada. But I really want to be in Mexico, then there's pain. There's pain because I want it, and it becomes despair and frustration and, peak levels of pain when there's a phenomena of hopelessness about it. It's never going to change. It's not only do I really want it and I'm separate, it's never going to change. It's hopeless. That's when that pain can become highly self-destructive and all that. And so that's what pain is there's a pain in the past that I'm afraid to feel. And that's the nature of traumatic pain. When your vulnerability, when your first love, for example, is opening up for the first time, it doesn't know the world, meaning you've never felt that attraction for a girl. You've never told anyone before. It's a new bud. It's a new blossom. And the question is it welcome? Is it safe? Is it secure? Is it wanted? Is there a future for that feeling, that persona? Does that persona have a future in this world? And the best way to tell is the template of the first taste, the first interaction with a blossoming persona and the outside environment sets the template in many ways, and particularly the first three interactions, because then you've got a pattern. So you've got this template forming. And so how does that, what's going to happen? Well, of course, every part of us wants to be loved, wants to be valued, wants to be accepted, wants to be known, wants to be important, wants to matter, wants to be secure in its survival. And most of all, the beautiful parts of us, love and truth and, desire, that we want that. We desire that. So to be met with the opposite, that the expression of that and the bringing together of what we want most, to be met with the antipathy of what we want, the scorn, the shame, is a shock. It is a social trauma. Because that part of us is saying, I can't live in this world. I, the one who loves, the one who longs, the one who dreams, am dying. And no one's stopping it. In fact, other people are gathering around to humiliate the one who's dying, and so I'm dying. There's no hope for me. And that can move into despair. Now this becomes so painful. I've got to get out of my body. I've got to separate. I can't deal with this. I can't feel this. This is just way too much. So the dissociation, the traumatic event, it's now frozen in deep pain. It's in a dissociated, frozen state in pain. I'm afraid to feel that pain because I don't know how to respond to it. I'm afraid I don't know what to do. So I keep dissociated, but now I'm afraid of that pain. Anytime anyone reminds me of that event, I look the other way. I don't want to see it because I'm afraid of the traumatic event. So I now have pain in the past that I am afraid of. Now, I've also built up and reinforced the beliefs of my abuser, that life's a bitch or whatever it is that makes, abusers as sick as they are to dump all that. I've now reinforced and taken on beliefs to numb and anesthetize the pain. It's never going to work out, it's hopeless, and this, which means that the future is filled with pain. Because if it's never going to work out, if you're never going to be loved, if you're always going to be miserable, then the future is going to be filled with that misery and pain too. Because when you're not loved in the future, it's going to feel just as painful as it did to not be loved in the past. Maybe the shock isn't there because you're expecting, but the dread is still there. The loneliness is still there. The misery is still there. It's like, I don't want to face the future in which I'm not loved, I'm not seen, I'm not cared for. I don't want to face any of that. It's so miserable. So now I'm afraid of the future. All fear is pain, is fear of pain in the past that is projected into the future. Meaning there is the expectation that whatever it is about our world that created that pain back there, that same thing is going to create the pain up here. And I don't want to be there feeling it. So I don't want to face the future. So fear is all about a resistance to pain in the future. Now, pain in the future is all about our beliefs. For example, we want to feel lovable. If we believe we're not lovable, then the expectation is that we will experience being unloved in the future, creating pain, which then leads to fear of pain, which then leads to fear of the future. And so it's set up that way. And I've had fear of all kinds of things in the future my entire life. But what I thought we would do is look at all the different things that fear is, to get to know fear a little bit. So the first we've already talked about, fear is evidence of faulty beliefs. And when you think of, well, what is a faulty belief? This is a quote from Lazarus. I don't know that I would call them faulty. It's certainly evidence of belief, meaning if you believe that tomorrow you're going to be happy and wonderful for the rest of your life, you are not scared of the future. You are excited to wake up. If you believe that you're going to be stolen from, humiliated, invisible, feel despondent, that no one's going to listen to you, that nobody knows you, and that that's going to be the way for the rest of your life, you are going to be, feel miserable as you think of the future. That will create pain here. The anticipation of that then will create pain now. And the expectation based on the belief that that's going to happen is going to create fear. So beliefs definitely create fear. And in Lazarus's terminology, fear is a symptom of faulty beliefs. Now, in the very higher truths, that is the case, meaning we are all on a conscious spiritual journey, coming from the source in which we are totally lovable and connected and perfect and wonderful, descending into this separate consciousness and fiddling around with life. And eventually, at some time in the past, in the future, eventually, we will transcend the illusion of, the separate ego consciousness, the physical body, etc., and we will return to source. We will return to the larger ecology, energetically and emotionally and physically and all that we're a part of. And so, and that is filled with more love and more beauty and more truth and more wonder, etc., than we can possibly imagine. And we can look at that just in terms of the trajectory of excellence. Every human being wants to feel good and doesn't want to feel bad. That's a really important part of human nature. Every human being wants to survive. And in order to do that, one must learn the art of success, which is the art of successfully relating to one's environment, which is the art of relating between the smaller self and the larger self of which we are a part. It's not really this, made-up cultural illusion of complete isolation and separation, because we're deeply connected. Now, if you think about it, reality is a teaching ground, is a training ground. If you put your hand in the fire and feel pain, you learn that fire is too hot and pull your hand away, and you stop putting your hand in the fire. If you learn that making a dish of this food tastes really, really good. You make that dish again. And reality is happening in all kinds of dimensions. If you learn that being raped doesn't feel very good, and that you get raped in this environment, you stop going in that environment to be raped over time. It takes time, and there's complications, because if you have helplessness and uncertainty, sometimes people will reenact their abuse because they don't have the certainty of their rescue. They don't have the certainty of change, so they want the certainty of something familiar, and they'll seek out the past pain as a bastion against the terror of the unknown. And so it can be confusing. Why is someone going back and repeating? They know that's painful. Why are they doing it? Sometimes it's just because it's familiar. It's certain. They know what's going to happen if they do that. They don't know how to deal with the unknown, and they don't know what will happen if they don't go back to be abused, because they've never done that before. And so certainty, the need for certainty in a traumatic situation often trumps the need for pleasure, because certainty in itself is a kind of pleasure. It's a deep, fundamental pleasure, and so people seek certainty. But when they feel secure and certain in both pleasure and pain, they always choose pleasure. If they feel uncertain about pleasure and even afraid of the unknown, and they feel very familiar with pain and trauma, they may often reenact the trauma consciously or unconsciously to get the certainty, the stability. I mean, I can live through a rape. I've lived through 10 rapes. I can live through another. But what I can't deal with is someone loving me. I've never done that before. And so, it's just overwhelming. I'm terrified. I haven't dealt with all this stuff, and I can't deal with feeling unfamiliar. I need to go back and do something that I know. And so human beings do pick certainty over uncertainty, even painful certainty, if it didn't kill them. If it did kill them, they're dead. If it didn't kill them, they'll often seek that painful reenactment. And so that's a part of it. But reality is constantly teaching. And over time, people get better. As they engage with any dynamic of reality, they get better over time. And if they don't, they die and they come back again and have another go at it. Lots and lots of probable realities, lots of lifetimes. And so they have another go and until they get the hang of it. And once people get the hang of it, once you know how to drive a bicycle, you don't just fall over again like for the hell of it. Once you know how to drive a car, you don't back up into your garage and kill 2 people every day, because you learn. It's no fun to do that. It's not fun. People are drawn to fun. And, and that corresponds with success. Success at what? Success at creating fun. So that's, an inevitable path. Everyone's on that journey. And at one point on that journey, every single person is going to succeed. They're going to find their way back into healthy relationship with the larger consciousness of which they are a part, and they're going to learn to let go of the various pains and traumas and things in the past, and then it's a continual matter of more beauty, more truth, more excellence, more goodness. Why? Because it's fun. It's fun to have grace. It's fun to save energy. It's fun to laugh. It's more fun than to be miserable and unhappy and all that. And so that there is an inevitability of that progress, just as there's an inevitability that when the dinosaurs were knocked out, it set everything back. Sure, trauma does that, but life came back, and cities get bombed and they come back, and forests get cut down and they come back, and then continue the evolutionary process, to the point beyond where the last trauma occurred. That's an inevitable part of evolution, of growth, of becoming. And so at some point that will occur. It has already occurred in the sense of timelessness outside of the narrow framework, because you have the whole program, the whole totality of the whole, and then you zoom in this little conscious mind, which is like a laser beam. studying this and then this and then this and then this. It's like a laser beam studying the frames of a DVD. The DVD is already done. The hero's journey has been complete. The separation from the whole, the sense of loss, the pain and misery, and the return to God, Goddess, all that is, it's already happened. But we're watching frame by frame by frame by frame, in the evolution of our egoic consciousness to open back up to that. So we go all the way down into this zoom-in lens, and we keep going out, and we keep expanding consciousness until we can see the full picture again, and see it through the lens of this egoic consciousness, as opposed to, the non-individuated consciousness of just the whole, without that ego element of distinction. And so that's already happened. And so in that sense, the belief that we're unlovable, we're already totally loved. So it's a faulty belief that is so painful. The belief that we're doomed for all eternity to be lonely is also a faulty belief. It's not true. It's just what we think. Because we're projecting what Sally Jane did with her friends and how they scribbled on our coloring book, and then they tore up our painting, and then they laughed at us and kicked our lunch. And it's like, is that what the entire eternity of existence is going to be? I'm so unvaluable, I'm so this and that and the other. I'll never, it's endless, And so it's the projection of that, into the future, rather than the projection of continual unfoldment, continual expansion, continual growth towards excellence. And beauty, truth, and goodness, the Platonic values, are kind of this triangle. They're all different flavors of that same core energy of love, of being, of becoming. That's the ideal. It's beyond words in terms of the transcendent ideal, and we're going there. It's inevitable. We're already there. We just can't see it within the framework of our beliefs and experiences and cult brainwashings and biological trainings and different religious shamings and all that. Within all that framework, it's very hard to see anything, and so we don't get it. So we're terrified and expressing our fear and belief in pain in other people, like, don't leave me here, come into the pain with me. I'm going to hurt you so that you know what I feel like. Don't leave me. I don't want to be all alone in this horrible nightmare of reality. Don't go. You feel happy. You're leaving me. I'll kick you. I'll hit you. I'll rape you. And then you'll feel miserable like me. And then I won't be all alone. And so it's the belief in loneliness and endlessly lonely and unloved forever, and all alone. And so if you believe that's what's going to happen based on the trauma of sociopathic parents and various things like that, well then your whole future is about that, and you just don't want to be left alone and felt like it's all your fault and stuff. And so then the reenactment, that virus spreads. All beliefs, all patterns of energy spread out until a pattern of equal or greater energy encounters them and transforms that energy into something more important. And so, it is an inevitability. It's a faulty belief from that perspective. It is not a faulty belief, however, if you believe that your mother is a narcissistic son of a bitch. And so you're afraid because, she hit you yesterday, she hit you the day before, and she hit you the day before that. And so I'm afraid she's going to hit me. And how painful that's going to be. It's not a faulty belief in terms of if that accurately predicts the hitting. So this is where I disagree with Lazarus. The purpose of a mental map, which we do with our thoughts and our beliefs and our expectations, this is a map. The purpose of a mental map, and we do it with our meanings as well. Our meanings, our thoughts, our expectations, our beliefs, our projection of why things are happening. Now, the purpose of a good map is to predict the future accurately enough so that you can navigate around it. for example, if my if my eyes are creating a map of stuff within visual range that says there's a finger there, there's a finger there. Now, if when I intersect there I feel a finger, that's a useful map to say that, oh my gosh, let's say I have a sharp knife, and I believe there's a finger there because I see it. And every time I see a shape like this at this vector of triangulation, I hit something. Now I'm scared because when knives hit fingers, there's pain. I don't want a severed finger, but when knives hit finger, there's pain. I expect there to be a finger here because there usually is when I see these little shadows and shapes and stuff like that. So I've got a knife. Now, the belief that there's a finger there is useful because it's accurate. Now, if there's no finger here, and we got the knife, and I believe there's a finger here, it's just not there, and I don't want to move because I don't want to hit the finger that isn't actually there, then it's a faulty belief. It's not a useful map of reality. So you're interacting with something that's, is just off to lunch. It's dissociative. And so, and that's what we call insanity. When someone sees an invisible friend and they think that everyone else sees them because they can't tell the difference between physical entities and non-physical entities, and so they're moving their car around people that nobody else sees, and they're driving out into the middle of the road where they could get hit by a car because they don't want to hit this, quote, invisible person. That's a faulty map. Their map is not distinguishing between between realities that are physical and realities that are not physical. And so they're confusing those two, and they're causing problems. So, what's a good belief in my book is a belief that predicts with a fair degree of accuracy, certainly well above chance, what you will create or what's coming. And so that doesn't seem faulty to me. But it is, of course, inaccurate in the largest sense. Once we understand and let in the totality of God got us all that is, of the beauty and joy that's coming to us, that's already there if we would just zoom out and be able to maintain a sense of self and identity, but also maintain the sense of luxurious beauty that we're all around us in so many dimensions that we've blocked out and stuff. Well, then, even if we die tomorrow, there's no fear. It's like, okay, you need to kill me. It's a little flash in a moment in time, but at that level of expansion also, I can probably see how to get out of the way. But if not, there's another lifetime. There's already a lifetime in which I've fully succeeded anyway, and so, it doesn't have to be this one. I can let go. I can feel beauty and, just open to that wonder. But the individual ego that says, I'm the only one here, there's no one else here, and I'll just vanish, and I'll be, hated and meaningless and stuff. No, don't kill me, and so there's that response. So this is all, that part of evidence of faulty belief. Now, fear is also a spark of consciousness. I'm going along, and there's a horn, and you wake up suddenly, and you see a car is driving at you fast, and you leap out of the way. So fear is a spark of consciousness. It's an intensity, it's a jolt, it's an electrical charge within the body, an instinct, etc. So it's a spark of consciousness that brings us fully into the present, in a position to respond more effectively than we're currently responding, and rapidly. And so, as such, fear is a teacher. So fear is a spark of consciousness. It's a spark, a wake up, and a teacher. Fear is also sensations, thoughts, and feelings. So all fear, you can say, like right now, I've got some pain right here, and I've got some pain on the side, and my low back is tight, so we've got sensation. And we've got thoughts, like, I wonder if they're going to judge me, I wonder if they're going to judge me, I wonder if they're going to judge me, that are tying in with those sensations. And we've got feelings. Oh, I don't want to feel judged, I don't want to do this, what if I'm going to fail? So every thought creates a feeling. Every thought and feeling creates a sensation. If you're embodied, then there's a connection. The chemicals produced by your thoughts and feelings create sensations, and sensations create thoughts and feelings. You can do a little example of this with it's called smile technology. So take your finger. Now we're holding the muscles into a position of the smile. And your body thinks, well, there must be something great going on because I never do that when I feel miserable. And so you feel great. Now, to have integrity, your body will go out and look at, okay, what? Oh, you're right. That is good. That's a beautiful painting over there. You don't see it, but I do. It's a beautiful painting over there. There's tons of great stuff going on. There's another one over there, a beautiful, this, and my lovely wife. And so, yes, there is something good. So when you have a sensation and a phenomena, you seek integrity, you seek integration. So you have to then think about some things that would make your feeling make sense. Otherwise, you feel crazy. And so that's the way that works. And so sensations, thoughts, and feelings. Now, this also speaks to an interesting truth, which is that you can interrupt fear, either mentally, emotionally, or physically. So we just interrupted it physically. It's a great thing to do, by the way. We interrupted it physically. I must not be afraid. I must be happy. Okay, so what am I? What's so great? And then you look around, you say, well, that's great, and that's great, and that's great. Of course, it's great. And so now you have a new belief. Things are great, and you've interrupted that. Now, the deepest fear, and I haven't explored this quite as much personally. It makes sense, so I'll go along with it. Lazarus says that the deepest human fear is to be alone and lonely forever, meaning completely separate from the source, and unlovable and shamed, and certainly if you think of the death of a cell. If you take an individual cell in the body and remove it from the body forever, it's going to die. That the cell is kept alive in its ecology. And this could be why this is the instinct to be the most horrible thing possible. If you try and separate yourself from the trees forever, or just 5 minutes, just close your nose. Five minutes. You can't stand a separation from the trees. The trees produced all this oxygen. Every time you breathe it in, you're breathing in tree relationship. And you don't want to be separate from that relationship because you die. When you understand ecological thinking, we are all particles that are part of a larger wave pattern, that are part of a larger ecology. And so in that sense, whenever the separation equals death, equals annihilation, equals disintegration. So it's all the same thing. So naturally we are terrified of separation, being alone and lonely forever, unwanted, unloved, etc. No flows of energy back and forth. That's the end of you. And so that's kind of the end thing. And so a lot of our fears tend to work their way up. Oh my gosh, I'm not going to get a good grade. Who cares? Well, if I don't get a good grade, I'm not going to get an A. Who cares? Well, then my parents are not going to love me. They're not going to praise me and make me feel important. They're going to make me feel like a shit and unwanted and unloved. Well, who cares? Well, if everyone starts treating me that way, I'm going to believe that I'm unlovable. Well, who cares? Well, if I believe that I'm unlovable, I'm going to start isolating and acting, because it hurts to seek love and not be loved. So I'm going to start pushing it away to maintain my sense of agency. And I'm going to go further and further away from the source. And I'm going to believe that nobody loves me, that I have no value. Now, if I start acting in a way that suggests I have no value, I'm not going to take care of my body. If I don't take care of my body and nobody else does, then I'm going to die. I'll be lonely and alone forever. And so, these spears work up, in these ways. And so I've got to study this bizarre math quiz by this teacher that doesn't seem to care about me, so that all that doesn't happen. Now, a perimeter fence around physical survival is another, expression or, way to look at fear. You walk up to a cliff, you feel fear. The fear is a premonition, so to speak. It's a perimeter fence. Nothing, fine, because why don't you just jump off the cliff? Because you're not in pain at the edge of the cliff. You're not in pain when you're jumping. It's so exciting. And you're not in pain when you're falling. It's exhilarating. But you're dead. Then you're in pain. And so what fear does is, physical sensation helps you with something like a fire because you can then quickly pull it back. But these things like cliffs or plunging an airplane or let's open the submarine hatch and see what happens. Those things, you have to imagine into the future something bad and then feel afraid of the something bad in the future that hasn't actually happened yet, and then you have to respond to the fear. Because if you only respond to physical sensation, you see, it's too late when you're falling at 80 miles an hour. It's too late when the first finger touches the ground and you say, "Ooh, that's painful. I won't fall the rest of the way." You don't have that choice at that moment with the momentum and gravity. You had that choice before you jumped off the cliff. And so the fear is to make you feel bad before you're in a position where feeling bad is escalating so quickly you could explode. And so you have a perimeter fence around survival phenomena. I already talked a little bit about a habit, an identity, and a grounding. Grounding is going back to something that we feel familiar with. So when you're highly abused as a child and you get thrown off center, what do you go back to? You go back to the pain that is your largest anchor. Meaning, what's never changed my whole life? That pain, that horror, that knowing that I'm worthless. That's never changed. It came on hard at age 1. It got bigger and bigger and bigger. By the time I was 10, it was absolutely rock solid. And, when I feel disoriented, I just go back to that anchor. I'm unworthy, I'm unlovable, and all that. And I feel fine in a sense of shock. I ground back and I know who I am again. I've got a certainty. It's also, so it's a grounding that then becomes an identity. I am the one who feels that. And also it becomes a habit. And habits are just things that we develop and do over time, and then we continue doing them until we change a habit. And so if we, continually said, "Oh my gosh, I'm scared, oh my God, I'm scared, oh my God, I'm scared, oh my God, I'm scared," then, as we grow up and leave home and stuff, reality may get quite nice. But it's a habit. It's like, well, a car could still run over me. Well, one only runs over 100,000 people, or so, every 10 years or something. Well, it could happen tomorrow, so there's a habit, and what about a nuclear fallout? Well, that's only happened, 2 times in the history of humankind. Oh, what could happen today? It could, and so you can't deny that. And so it's just this habit, let's find something to maintain the habit. We talked about that it's this projection and a symptom of pain in the future, projected anticipated pain or actual pain in the future. Sometimes when you're falling off a building and expecting to feel miserable when you hit the ground, it does feel miserable when you hit the ground, and so it's an accurate projection. It's also a manipulation. None of us like feeling fear. We all know what it feels like to feel fear. We also know how out of control and panicky we are when we're in a lot of fear. And so fear can be a very, conscious or unconscious manipulation to say, if we want someone to do the work for us, or comfort us, or not make us be responsible. Like, it's like you've got a bill to pay. Well, we don't want to pay the bill, or we don't know how to pay the bill, or we don't want to feel bad that we haven't paid the bill. And so we might, go into a conscious or unconscious manipulation. I am so terrified I'll be thrown out on the street. This happened, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened. And what we're looking for is to have a nice pivot from you've got to pay your bill today or be thrown out on the street to don't worry about the bill, you're not going to be thrown out on the street, and let me help you. What do you need help with? Oh, good. And so you'll not only not collect your bill, you'll do this and that. And so, and some of that manipulation is legitimate, and meaning you can be way over your head. I don't know how to do this. I honestly don't know what to do here. I'm terrified, and I'm not very good at this, and I do need help. And that's a very important thing to articulate and communicate if that's the case. And it can also be, I want attention, or I don't want to have to be more mature, or whatever it is. It can also be that dynamic of the chauvinistic response in the masculine-feminine chemistry. Because one of the aspects of chemistry is the damsel in distress and the hero. And so, a woman can consciously or unconsciously do that legitimately and create chemistry. It's a very interesting dynamic that's that does create flow. I desperately need help, and I'm going to help you. You've got flow there. And all chemistry is about multidimensional flow. So you've got flow there. You've got a talker, you've got a listener, you've got flow. Someone who needs help, someone who's helping, you got flow. Someone who needs and someone who meets the need, you have flow. So that's chemistry. But you can also synthetically create it. You're so smart, I'm so dumb. You're so strong, I'm so weak. Could you please come over and do this stuff, because I'm helpless without you? And that creates, well, of course, I'm very important and stuff, and I like feeling that way. And so you can create a chemistry there synthetically or really, with that aspect of manipulation. It's also a bonding through intensity and shared feelings. We know and are known in intense pain and intense exaltation, at the two kind of extremes. At our best parts, we have a sense of intimacy and knowing and being known up with ourselves and others, and an extraordinary pain, which includes fear, because fear is fear of what? Of extraordinary pain. You have a sense of intimacy and knowing. And so, often people will come together around a natural disaster. We're all scared. We all empathize, etc., so you have a bonding. And so I don't want to give that up. I don't want to say, well, I know I'm a divine being and it's no big deal. And so, well, you're weird. You're not bonding with us. Just we'll have our own experience. So it creates a sense of belonging through shared fear. It's also a stored traumatic memory template in the body. So this goes back to the trauma. If the body produces the chemical that says I'm scared, run, fight, flee, and we block the chemical and we don't release it, then the body is kept in a perpetual state of expectation that is not resolved. The message hasn't been cleared out of the system. It's kind of like you put the red sign up for extreme fire danger. Now the fire danger passed, but but the bolt rusted. And so it doesn't go back to say fire danger 0. It's raining now. There's no fire danger. It still says code red though, because nobody moved the sign back. And chemicals locked in the body are that sign that are telling the conscious mind, you're in danger, you're not. So when the body is screaming every day, you're in danger, you're in danger, you're in danger, you look around and it's like, I don't know what the danger is. Well, it must be really bad then, because you can't see it coming. It's there, but you don't see it. So now you have a new thing to be anxious about. So that's another thing that fear is stored traumatic memory in the body that hasn't been erased as the trauma has passed. It's also a cry for help. I'm scared means I am expecting pain that I don't want to face or can't face. Certainly crippling fear. I'm expecting pain to come in a way that's overwhelming me that I don't know how to respond to. So we've got a cry for help. It's also a companion in loneliness, meaning when we're feeling isolated and shamed and alone and hurt and abused, the fear is always there. It's constantly yammering away. That could happen, that could happen, that could happen, that could happen. And it's the only one talking to you. If nobody loves me out there, but my fear is always talking to me. My fear never leaves me alone. So it's a companion. It's a sense that it's always there. Thank you for being there, fear. What would I do without you? I'd feel completely empty. In that companionship, it's also a distraction from other feelings and other truths. Like, I'd hate to see that I'm a jerk, because that thing I did there is a bit jerky, but I don't want to look at that. So I'm afraid of the rent. I'm afraid. So it's a distraction in that avoidance. I don't want to see this part of me. And so I'm going to run around frantically. Oh, what if I lose my keys and then I run out of gas? It's just a frenetic distraction. There's also a chemical addiction because it's like any drug. When you first feel fear, it's this big spark of awakeness and aliveness and all that. When you felt fear chronically for 40 years, right here, when you felt fear chronically for 40 years and you relax, there's a kind of a numbness. It's like you've been listening to this loud sound and then it's quiet and there's the ringing in the ear. And it doesn't feel very alive. It just feels kind of exhausting. And so how do you feel more alive again? Well, all you have to do is inject some fear. Well, how do you do that? You just follow your habitual thoughts. Oh my gosh, I'm not going to be loved. I'm not going to be loved. I'm not going to be loved. Oh, they're going to judge me for this and that and the other. Someone's just going to do that for this. And so there I am. And now I feel fear again. Now I'm awake and alive. And so it's a chemical addiction. I feel bad when there's no pumping, adrenaline. I'm just feeling lethargic and stuff like that. So fear is adrenaline. It's also a symptom of low and projected rank. If you are in a dominance hierarchy of any kind, and you're expecting to be at the low end or you are at the low end. Now, if you feel like a fraud, the imposter syndrome, things like that, and you expect to be deranked and treated like shit, in a dominance hierarchy, the abuse goes to the people in the lowest hierarchy, and the perks go to the alpha. And so if you're in alpha and expecting to be an alpha, you don't feel a lot of fear. If you are in very low ranking or expecting to be found out and pushed into low rank, you feel fear because there's much more expected pain because dominance hierarchies dominate those willing to be dominated, which are those who need the sociological connection and thus are willing to take the abuse, the raw end of the stick. The bowl goes around, all the good roles in a system go to the people with the first dibs. So the last people are the ones, that are offered the dregs. You can be our scapegoat. You don't want to be our scapegoat? Go out in the wild and die. You want to be join with us? We need a scapegoat. So you be the scapegoat. You can clean the house and do this and, be treated irritably. And that's, of course, going to be shaming and demeaning, and so that it's a symptom of anxiety and stuff, the anticipation of a low-rank treatment. And so these are the various things that fear are. And the thing that I've mostly done with fear, I've worked with it, it's a mixed bag, meaning that it is exhausting. I have chronic fatigue from constantly overstimulating and stuff without rest, so it's exhausting. It's also in my body and stuff, and you know, it's like it's very difficult to get through it. And it's only been in the last couple of years that I even knew what trauma was and understood the biology of trauma. It's also an expression of a gap in sensitivity. Now, this is why many highly sensitive people, myself included, feel anxiety in social contexts where 80 to 90% of the people around are not only not at that sensitivity threshold or setting, but they are unaware that they're not at that setting. Meaning, in the arrogance of self-centeredness in a psychologically illiterate culture, everyone assumes that other people are like them. And so when 80 to 90% of the population, which is not in the highly sensitive category, assumes that everyone else is just like them, then when they hit you on the back, they hit you on the back not the way you want to be hit on the back, they hit you on the back the way they want to be hit on the back. They turn up the volume in the music not to the level you want to hear, to the level they want to hear. And they assume that if you are a decent, normal person, like them, that you will like the same volume, the same music, the same intensity, the same rough sex, whatever it is, as they do, and have another drink, and this and that and the other. And they don't get it. And they don't get that they don't get it. And they get angry because in a traumatized culture, we don't like the unknown. And how do we know we're in unknown terrain? When people aren't doing what we expect them to do. That's alarming. For a traumatized culture, people don't do what you're expected to do. It's like, who knows what's going to happen next? I don't have a map for this, so I'm scared. Now, when insensitive people are scared of the anomalous behavior of sensitive people, they shame them, attack them, blame them and stuff, because they're scaring them. You should be making me feel comfortable here, and you're not. Why aren't you? You could be. You could drink like me. You could just stop pretending you're so fussy and this is a big deal, and you could enjoy yourself, but you're not. And I'm not changing, and I'm not learning a new way, and you cut it out. Be like us. And thus the eternal stoning of the minority. The killing, the murder, the stoning, the shaming, the scapegoating of the minority. Whoever it is, they're not like us, and we don't want to deal with them. We want to punish them for reminding us that reality is bigger than our own myopic self-centeredness. And so, as a sensitive, you will be, or as a minority of any kind, one is aware of the threat of that, to one degree or another. And this is a minority in any category. It's definitely there with sensitivity, because you can expect in an insensitively trained world, meaning if a restaurant plays music, are they going to play it for the 10 to 20% of people that are highly sensitive, or are they going to play it for the 80% of people that like it at that volume, at that type? They're going to play it for the 80% because that's good for business, which means that the 10 to 20% is going to be anxious and in pain all dinner, and then this, and the dishes rattled in the sink, and that was anxious producing, and then this happened, and then so-and-so was too close, and then someone banged into me, and nobody else notices because that's all fine within this stimulation threshold. But in this stimulation threshold, it's all a bit jarring, draining, and unnerving. And so that's another kind of underlying aspect of anxiety and fear. There's also, of course, all kinds of cultural clashes where in an emotionally illiterate culture, if you don't understand hate, for example, it's a magnificent energy. It's very concentrated, very dense. It speaks a lot of messages about what's going on in the surrounding environment. Hate will tell you a lot about what's going on around the person who hates, or about their past, and so you can learn stuff from anything. But in a culture that judges rather than understands, you have these continual implosions into pain that are then not remedied and stuff, which then can migrate down into hate, which is then judged and attacked, which of course never helps anything. It just turns it underground and makes, it just brings more pain into the future, basically. So the ways that I have looked at fear is warnings of things that will come if I don't do anything. Now, this creates a certain amount of anxiety because there's a lot of things that I don't know how to do, such as endlessly being invited to environments that draw out the worst in me, would be one way of saying it, and then being judged if the worst gets drawn out in me. That just seems to happen. And so how do you change that? But there are a lot of things that I can do stuff about. For example, when I pivoted away from going to work at 8 or 9 a.m. and started going to work at 1 p.m., I had fear that I would be viewed as unprofessional. And absolutely right, I was viewed as unprofessional. And I didn't want to be viewed as unprofessional. What I wanted to do was get my work done by an agreed time, get it done early, in fact, but I wanted the mornings to write and do stuff on my own. And so I said, okay, I think people will continue to view me as unprofessional, given that contractors normally start early in the morning and I don't want to. So what am I going to do? Well, what I did was I put a clause in my contract. And I said, for personal reasons, work will usually start in the afternoon. And your work will be done by the agreed time. In fact, 90% of my jobs are done early. And this is part of our contract. And I just mentioned that briefly in the contract, and suddenly I'm professional again, because I'm doing what I said I would do in writing. And people think that's professional. So, if I don't say that in advance, then they're going to default to, when do contractors start work? Well, they start in the morning. Well, when's yours starting? It's not. Well, what's wrong with that? They're angry because there's a gap between they're expecting this and this is happening. And they don't have a narrative for that. So they just say, well, it's bad. It's unprofessional. It's a great narrative to just blanketly judge things because you're different from other people. And so that takes care of that. And then I have a fear about, dietary allergies, because I have allergies to dairy and milk and stuff. So what am I going to do about it? Well, I'm going to write down all my allergies, and when going to dinner, I'll copy and paste that little thing and send it an email. These are my allergies. Would you like me to bring something that I can eat, or do you want to cook to this? Let me know. But that takes care of that. Well, then that creates a new fear. What if they think I'm too picky and too fussy to cook for? Well, that's a real reality. So what's my answer to that? Just say, don't worry if this is too fussy for you. Let's tell them in advance before planning dinner. Don't worry if it's too fussy for you. We just won't eat together. And I'll find people that like my diet. So that means making friends and stuff with people that enjoy cooking to my style and that kind of thing. But what if there aren't enough people? Yeah, this comes to dead ends at various points because, as I follow these various responses, which is basically fear, look at the probability field, see that something is happening or is likely to happen, and then take action. Well, there's a whole variety of areas that I can't take action, meaning my neighbor up the hill, in very simplistic terms, is a jerk. And I can move, but if I move, I know enough about America to know that there's no guarantee where I move to, the neighbor isn't going to be a jerk. And what if I move in and a year later a jerk moves in next door? I can't control that. And so I'm stuck. So if it's very stressful, which it is, there's one jerk, would block the street, and then he would shout at people. It didn't seem to matter who. He just rage and shout. It was quite traumatic. And I called the police. They said, well, we can't stop anyone shouting from you. So I guess drive the other way, And so I just, had mild anxiety every time I went by his house. Well, what do you do with that? There's nothing much I can do. I cannot move because it's a very unlikely scenario that I'll find the benefits that I like here and have a guarantee that no one will shout at me. It's just very, very unlikely. And so so then what do? You just feel anxious to whatever degree and breathe, and breathe through it. I don't know what else to do. And so there's lots of those kinds of things where I've done everything that I can and I can't control, the culture, the outer environment. I mean, it's so lonely, for example, in our culture when, I went through a period of sexual abuse, with the Human Awareness Institute, and people would say, hey, how you doing? And I'd say, I feel terrible. I'm really at my wit's end about all this, fallout from sexual abuse and various stuff like that. And they'd say, okay, see you later. And I'd say, you've just told me, fuck off, you don't matter. I don't like that. But I'm also upset that there's 14-year-old incest survivors going to get this message. This isn't just me getting this. This is terrible that we've lined up, our cult in order to abuse the victims. This is sick. I hate this. I hate this. And it's like, well, what can I do about it? Well, I can blog about it. Well, then people don't like to watch the blogs. Why? Because we're a shadow-averse culture. It's like, we don't like talking about sexual abuse in our culture. Suddenly, this is, not very politically correct. And this is just so ridiculous. But what do you do when, again, like that child dynamic surrounded by this big force, where you're punished for being punished, for being punished, for being punished? And then you have all the symptoms of being punished, and then you're punished for exhibiting those symptoms. And nobody knows what the hell they're doing. And then they complain that they don't like the way the culture is fragmenting and falling apart and losing its courtesy. Of course it is. We're treating ourselves and each other like shit. Of course it's falling apart. I mean, is that a surprise? How numb and ignorant do you have to be to ignore people in incredible amounts of pain, to ignore homelessness in a profoundly rich culture? And so now this creates then a new problem. I talk like this for too much and people get overwhelmed and just avoid me, which can then strengthen the fear. I'll be all alone and lonely forever. So these things I don't know how to do. I have literally made about 1,000 to 2,000, 5,000, something like that, choices that have very carefully structured my life to avoid certain painful situations and create more pleasurable ones. But I have not figured out how to clear out the traumatic residue of the past, how to deal with the fact that as a sensitive, I'm regularly shocked into states that other people don't understand and then shame me for feeling, which is an endless loop. And it's lonely and it's painful. That I'm an adrenaline addict, with chronic fatigue, that my strongest identity is my earliest memories of terror. And so when I'm shocked, I go back to terror, and how to work with that. I honestly don't know, other than to continue to work with transcendent states and meditation. That's the ultimate healing for me of fear is, if fear is the ultimate epitome of being alone and lonely forever, then what we're talking about is complete divorcing from the source. The source of what? God, Goddess, all that is. So I cannot force human beings to be kind, to be intelligent, to be empathic. I can't shake someone and say, you know, when I'm feeling hate, that's the time when I'm most terrified and really need a hug. That's not the time I need to get a lecture and to be shoved out of the party. You know, that doesn't work, you know, because your own hate understands the same thing. You have hate at some point in your psyche. If you don't, you're not paying attention. And you know, and you keep shoving that out as well. That doesn't work either. What, you know, form a circle in the party and let's send some love to the people in the most pain. That works. That creates a whole new transcendent energy. That's a yes after that, because every part of you that's in suppression and denial gets the message there's hope, and that releases energy back into the world. So that's an intelligent message. But you don't know that, and you don't know that you don't know that, and so you're going to punish me for your ignorance. And that's painful, because we're all suffering because of that protocol. We're all suffering from that ignorance. Now, connecting with Source, you know, God, Goddess, all that is, unseen friends, higher self, meditation, loving my wife, loving my dog. Well, these are superior, in technical terms, presences. My wife is 9 times more loving than the typical, you know, cultural American that I meet. My dog is 10 times more loving than, you know, the typical human being that I meet. God, Goddess, all that is, and unseen friends and stuff. Don't judge. And so there's all this beautiful energy that comes in, not from the cult around me, not from human beings around me, but from a small, you know, cultivated opening that can allow me to stop taking it personally, one, which breaks the cycle. Because, again, you know, when it's just you and me, it's like it's all about me. No, that's the regressed child. To stop taking it personally and to understand, of course, you're sociopathic in this way and that way because you tried to feel as a child and were told to shut up and go to your room. Well, you were taught to be sociopathic to your deep wounds. You were taught that that's, you know, sissy girls do and you should be a real man and all that. Otherwise, you're not going to get any love and support. Do you want love and support? You did. So what did you have to do? You had to do what the cult dictated. You had to follow your brainwashing. And so, of course you did that. That has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with who you are. You're a magnificent being. But you're stuck, to whatever degree you're stuck in that, and it's okay. It's not about me. So let me pray and ground and flow energy and reconnect with the greatest truth of all. The greatest truth is that we are totally and completely loved exactly as we are. The greatest truth is that we are completely perfect in the larger ecology of which we are a part. The greatest truth is that we are on a journey to continually improve the beauty, truth, and goodness, the love, the excellence, the grace, the intelligence that we are. And it is inevitable. And you're suffering and I'm suffering in the dynamic of cult interference, of faulty beliefs, of habitual past, of past traumas projected into the future because we don't know how to deal with them. So there's ignorance, there's pain, there's fear, there's brainwashing, there's all this stuff, and it's time to break the cycle. And so that's the ultimate healing that I'm working with more at the moment, is shifting from the terror that leads to blame, because the world isn't doing it right. You know, it didn't teach my parents how to love me. It didn't teach me how to love myself. It didn't teach this and that. The world isn't doing it right. It's it's your fault. Mom, dad, world, government, bullies. It's your fault, that I'm traumatized and stuck in PTSD and all this. And I'm going to have a fit and try and get attention. And that's what children do, of course. It doesn't often work as a child if you're in a sociopathic environment, and doesn't often work as an adult if you're in a sociopathic environment. And yet healing and prayer, grace, love, not looking to the average human being to be able to be anything better than the culture that produced all this fear and pain and trauma. But discovering that there are divine consciousnesses within us and without us, that love us, that forgive us, that hear us, that speak to us, that want to interact with us, that want to reach out and hold us, that have endless compassion and patience in any state that we are in. Lets in new energy and heals the fear. It heals the fear in the belief that I will be alone and unloved and lonely forever. Because how can that be if I'm surrounded by energy that is outside of the frameworks of time? It's timeless love and timeless energy, to be absolutely certain that when the traumatized, addicted memories in this body dissolve back into the soil, that my consciousness will lift out of those traumatic memories and into a state of liberation, into the grace, into the beauty, into the trust and the love of those beings who I can feel loving me right now, who have always loved me, who will always love me, and who in time I will join in the ecosphere of consciousness because it's more fun, because I'm learning a little bit more and more every day. And at one point, I will have the mastery to create, to co-create, and sustain that state. And when I do, it is more fun to be a part of that loving consciousness than it is to be worried about punishing and hating and all that. It's more fun. And so I'll do it, like we all do. We all want to feel good and not feel bad. And when we feel good, the thing that makes us feel the best is to see other people and other beings around us feeling good as well. When we feel terrible, when we're feeling alone and helpless and small and hurt and wronged and betrayed, and that we're stuck here and we're going to be here for the rest of our lives, then what feels good is to punish other people and make them feel the same way. You're not going to enjoy your life. Well, you made me feel this way, and that's what feels good when you're small and stuck there. You don't know how to get out. But when you learn to co-create that magnificent state of resonance, that beauty and truth, the most fun is to join those consciousnesses that resonate with that grace, with that love, that majesty, that beauty and truth, elegance, the forgiveness, the release, the spontaneity, the grace. It's so beautiful. And when you're in that state, you wish it for everyone. It's not personal. You want it to go out for the world because that's more fun. The funnest thing you can possibly be is to have mastery in a great state, surrounded by a vast sea of consciousness that is echoing to the same celestial music that's dancing to your music of joy. It's the most magnificent reality imaginable, to feel the distinction and the union, the harmony of billions of consciousnesses rippling out throughout timeless reality in that endless, creative, joyful, magical, endless grace. Beyond words. That's what's fun. And so, you have to give all that up to hold a grudge. So holding a grudge is only something when you have no access to that. You can't possibly get out of your hellhole and all that. Then holding a grudge is better than feeling helpless and meaningless, and that your abuser is enjoying your impotence and all that. Then getting them back, is so exciting. So that's kind of how I work currently with fear, is connecting with grace, with positive futures, with futures that love me, futures who I have become that are healed, that are beautiful, that are true, not just in this physical lifetime, but beyond. There's just so much more out there.